నమస్కారం. డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయ విద్యార్థులకు స్వాగతం.
Sample method studies are part of the total elements of the universe, and the results obtained on the basis of the study are applied to the universe from which the sample is drawn. In sampling techniques, the data are collected from a few representative units selected from a large population for making logical inferences about the parent population. In fact, all of us, consciously or unconsciously, knowingly or unknowingly, use the sampling method in our day-to-day life. For example, when we go to a doctor, only a small pinch of blood is taken from the patient's body only to test whether a patient suffers from a particular disease or not. To discuss the various aspects relating to sampling techniques, sampling procedures, I have two subject experts with me in the studios. They are Professor Regularity from the Department of Commerce, Usmania University, who is presently the Director, District PG Colleges of Usmania University. I have another subject expert with me, Professor K.V. who is presently the Board of Studies in Commerce, Chairman Board of Studies in Commerce of Usmania University. Now, these experts would discuss the concept of sampling, the procedure of sampling, distinction between sampling and census methods of collecting data, and how to collect a sample, what is a sample design, what is a sample frame, what are the different sampling techniques, and so on. Now, we have been talking about sampling for the last, as an introductory remark, like sampling is this and sampling is that. In what context do we actually talk about sampling? I would like Professor Obaledi to answer this question. No. In what context do we actually talk about sampling?
Yes, we talk about sampling in the context of data collection. As a matter of fact, the fundamental objective of statistics is to facilitate comparison, thereby meaning to facilitate decision making. For the purpose of decision making, we need the relevant data and information. These data have to be collected, and while collecting the data, now of course different methods can be adopted. In that context, we talk about sampling.
Now, what are the different methods of data collection? There could be 1 or 2, 3, 4, whatever. And what are the major methods of collecting sampling, data for a statistical investigation? Professor Achilapati.
Yeah, sampling, there are methods of collection. We can classify them into census and the sampling. The census method, where we consider each and every item in the universe as a part of it, and then we collect the data. And in sampling, we collect a part of the universe, and that is considered as a sample, and we collect the data through sampling.
Now, would you like to throw more light on the census method of collecting data? What exactly do you mean by census?
Now, Dr. Sudhakar, I think here we have to make one or two concepts clear. That is, what do you mean by universe? What do you mean by population? Now, unless we are very clear about these two concepts, and there is no point in talking about the census method and sampling method. Now, universe means the area of study, whereas population means the various elements about which we want to study. That is, the universe consists of various elements. These elements are referred to as the population. Of course, universe consists of population, and population is in the universe. Therefore, in common parlance, these two concepts are used as synonyms. So, sometimes population means universe and universe means population, but if you want to make a fine distinction between the two, population is the elements which are there in the universe, and the universe is the area which consists these elements. For example, you want to study what is the population of Hyderabad. So, Hyderabad is the universe, and the various elements are the human beings living in the city of Hyderabad. Now, your question is what is census and what is sample. Now, if the universe consists of 1000 elements and you want to collect the data from all the 1000 elements, then it is referred to as census method of study, because you are studying each and every element of the population. On the other hand, instead of studying the entire 1000 items, you want to select a few, say for example 10% of it, for example 100 items out of 1000 you want to select, then you are collecting the data from these 100 only and then making a study. This is what is referred to as the sample study. I think the concept is
I
clear.
was under the impression that universe and population are the same, and there is only a sample and a population, which is nothing but again universe. Thank you very much for that distinction. And I would like Professor Achilapathy to throw more light on the concept of sampling basically. I mean, Professor Obalreddy has actually clarified what exactly is the census and how universe is different from population, how it is different from sampling. Now, would you like to add something to what Professor Reddy has actually said?
Yeah, we can give a pictorial representation on this. If we look into the picture here, the chart shows you find a square. That square can be called as universe, and there is a big circle, and the circle, if we look into it, that can be called as population. And the inside, whatever the dots that we have, we can say all the elements. And when we look into the elements of population, within the elements we have put another small circle.
Okay.
That we can call it as segment, that is a sample.
That means
when
instead of studying the entire circle, if you study only a small circle, that is a part of it, that is what is called sampling study.
Sure. Right.
And here, if we look into it carefully, the sample is also drawn in the form of a circle, because the sample must represent the characteristics of the population.
No, that's a good one, right.
So, sample, when we say, it is a segment of the population, and segment of the population, it represents the characteristics of the population. And the universe, as rightly said by Professor Obalreddy, that universe need not be consisting of population.
What are the different types of universe? Well, like there could be 2-3 different types, and then I would like Professor Obalreddy Garu to answer this question.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you have already clarified what exactly is a universe and what is the difference between universe and population. You just clarified what exactly is sample. Then I'd like you to answer this maybe in a greater detail.
Yes. Universe or universes can be broadly classified into two, as finite universes and infinite universes. A finite universe is one where the total number of elements are known. In other words, in statistical language, where the total of n is known. Just now I said we have a universe with 1000 elements. So, we know what is the total n. So, this is what we call finite universe, whereas an infinite universe is one where the totality or the total number of elements of the universe are not known.
Sure, would you like to give some examples?
Yes. For example, what are the total number of stars in the sky? I think we cannot give the exact answer. And sometimes what happens, for all practical purposes, even though it can be considered as infinite universe, a finite universe, for practical purposes we consider it as infinite. For example, what are the total number of hair on the head of a person? Of course, on my head you may count, but it may be difficult to count on the head of Dr. Sudhakar. So, therefore, for all practical purposes we consider him as the infinite universe. So, finite universe and infinite universe is one category. So, here finite universe means we can study sample or census method. But whereas in case of infinite universe, where the totality is not known, whatever the size of the sample, any amount is considered as sample only, because it cannot be census, because you do not know the totality. Now, there is another way of classifying the universes as a homogeneous universe and heterogeneous universe. A homogeneous universe is one where all the elements are similar. if that is so, if you study one or all, it gives the same result. But whereas in case of heterogeneous universe, each item is different from others. So therefore, when you are studying whatever the total number of characteristics that are present in the universe, your sample size must be such so that it includes all these characteristics. That is what is called heterogeneous universe. There is a third way of classifying the universe also.
Sorry
It
for
is
interrupting. Would you
physical
like to give
universe.
one or two examples,
Yeah.
like heterogeneous, homogeneous kind of thing? One or two
Heterogeneous and homogeneous, okay. Of course, the natural law is that there are many things which are similar, which are uniform, but at the same time there may be some differences or deviations. So that is what is called unity in diversity. For example, all human beings are alike, because many characteristics, you have 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 1 mouth and 2 legs, etc. But at the same time, so all human beings are alike. So this is homogeneous universe. But at the same time, for example, if you classify some animals, some human beings, some cars, etc., that is one category, this is another category, this is the third category, etc. Okay? Even within the human beings also, depending on the nature of the study, different, based on different characteristics, you can classify. And the third way of classifying the universe is physical universe and hypothetical universe. A physical universe is one which is existing, that is which you can see. For example, what is a classroom, or what are the total number of students in a classroom, means it is existing universe. For example, when you toss a coin, it is a hypothetical universe. Any number of times you can go on tossing a coin, and for example, if you toss 100 times you can count, but it is imaginary, hypothetical. So these are the 3 ways of classifying the universes.
About a few moments ago, Professor Obalreddy has said there could be a census study, there could be a sample study. I would like to know from you, at least for the benefit of the students, what is exactly a sample study? I would like Professor Obalreddy to answer this.
Now, as I told you earlier, when the universe consists of so many elements, and if you are studying all the elements, that is what is called census study, janaba lekkala.
Right.
Chadavadam. Ala kakunda, when you want to study a part of it, say in mathematical language, if you want to say a population is a set, whereas a sample is a subset.
Set, right.
In other words, a sample is a part of the population, or it can also be defined as a microcosm, that is, it is a miniature of the population. In other words, whatever the characteristics that are present in the population, you have to select the sample in such a way that it also consists the same characteristics. I will give an example. Now, a person, for example, Dr. Sudhakar is there, he is a person of 5.5 feet. Now, I want to take a small photograph, a say passport size photograph, 1.5 inch. Now, this 1.5 inch photograph, the moment we see this 1.5 inch photograph, immediately we say this is Dr. Sudhakar, because even though it is a miniature of Dr. Sudhakar, but it has all the characteristics of Dr. Sudhakar. That is why we are immediately able to recognize it as Dr. Sudhakar. Similarly, whatever the characteristics in the population, if you select the sample in such a way that all these characteristics are present in the sample, then whether it is census study or sample study, or whether you study the whole or whether you study a part, it more or less gives this dependable, reliable results. That is why we go for sample study many a time in order to save the money, the material, the time, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Now, the question is, when you say when the population consists of so many things, but you want to study only a few, a part of it, not the whole. Now, the question is, how do you select these few from the many? That is the crux of sampling.
I think we have come to a stage where we should mention even what is a good sample, what is a bad sample, what is not a sample at all. So, to be a good sample, the sample must possess certain characteristic features. Now, What do you think are the characteristics of a good sample?
A sample, when you select, it must be representative, as he rightly said, it is a miniature, it should represent. But
You
is
said
it
it's a microcosm.
microcosm?
Right, fine.
When you say microcosm, it should typify. So, selecting a sample, it should be done in such a manner that it represents the characteristics of the population. If it does not represent the characteristics of the population, it is not a correct sample. So, what we do is we select a sample which is representative and which is adequate. It should be adequate and it should be reliable, and it should be it should reflect, it should represent the different sectors. So, sometimes it will be in clusters, sometimes in stratifies, different heterogeneous characteristics of the population have to be represented. When we select different types, different kinds, and different from different segments, if you select, it is possible. So, the sample that we select must be sufficiently large. It should not be too high, it should not be too small. If you take it too high, perhaps calculations become difficult. If you take it too small, it will not reflect the characteristics. So, it should be adequate, it should be it should represent the characteristics, and this characteristics have to be taken care while selecting the sample.
Now, when you think a sample size would be truly representative of the characteristics of the population. Now, what should be the sample size basically? Is there any rule saying that 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, or any other standard?
Strictly speaking, there is no hard and fast rule about the size of the sample. How much should be the size? There is no hard and fast rule.
One thing I would like to add, that it is not the large or small size of the sample that will influence the results of the sample study, but the way you select the sample, that is more important. A large size of the sample unsystematically selected will not give dependable results, whereas a small sample which is very systematically selected will give reliable and dependable results.
Right.
Therefore, here it is the systematic selection of the sample that is more important than the size of the sample.
Selection procedure is more important than the size.
Yeah,
that's right. Now, what are the different bases for the sampling?
So, actually the sampling is based on various theories. Sample study is not based on certainties, please remember that. Sample results or these conclusions drawn based on the sample are based on probabilities, not on certainties. So, therefore, sampling sampling bases are: one is the theory of probability, number 2 the law of statistical regularity, number 3 the law of inertia of large numbers. I think the students must have gone through these things in the initial pages of their course itself. However, I will try to explain in brief about each one of them. Now, how do you select the sample? And each sample must be given an equal opportunity or equal chance or equal probability.
Equal, independent.
That is, of course, every sample must be independent.
That's right.
And each independent item must be given equal chance to be represented in this sample. For example, in a class there are 40 students. If you select one particular person, come on, stand up, and we will select, this is deliberate. Otherwise, you are not giving equal opportunity for the remaining 39 people to be represented in this sample.
In fact, the student is giving an opportunity to pick him up.
Yeah. So, therefore, what you have to do is, now what you are doing, of course, later we will see what are the methods of selecting the sample. Here, some lottery method we will take, and before we select, nobody knows who is going to be represented. That means each one is having equal probability, equal chance to be represented in the sample. So, therefore, the basis of selection is that is probability. Then there is another thing, that is what we call the law of statistical regularity, or what we call the law of statistical uniformity. As a matter of fact, the nature consists of uniformity. Of course, at the same time there is certain amount of diversity. Now, the fundamental question is, whatever the subject we are studying, in many respects the elements in the population are uniform. There is a sort of regularity. Because of the regularity, whether you select X or Y or Z, we get the more or less same result. But of course, between X and Y there may be certain amount of deviation or variation. Because of that, there may be variation in your conclusions. Otherwise, whether you study one or all,
Okay.
it must be same. So, because of the statistical regularity or uniformity, for example, there are say you want to study the student population, okay, all students are alike, no, to that extent, but there will be some amount of deviation, that is there may be rural student, there may be urban student, there may be male student, there may be female student.
Good. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, these are the deviations. So, therefore, the sample must also include these deviating characteristics also. Then only the sample becomes a representative one. Suppose if all, according to the law of statistical regularity, all are uniform, all are alike, that is what we say. If it is a homogeneous universe, అంటే సజాతీయమైనటువంటి జనాభా అయినట్టు కనుకైతే నువ్వు ఒక్కటి చదివినా లేక అన్నీ చదివినా కానీ రిజల్ట్స్ విల్ బి సేమ్. ఐ విల్ గివ్ వన్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, యువర్ బ్లడ్, ది బ్లడ్ వెదర్ ఇట్ ఈస్ ఆన్ ది హ్యాండ్ ఆర్ ఇన్ ది లెగ్ సైడ్ ఆర్ ఇన్ ది వీక్ సైడ్, ఎవ్రీవేర్ ఇట్ ఈస్ సేమ్ క్యారెక్టరిస్టిక్స్. So, the blood here is different from the blood here. If that is, then it is heterogeneous universe. That is why sometimes when you go to the lab, they may pick up the blood from here or sometimes from say from this hand, hand, etc. But out of the total blood you are having in the body, but they are just taking a drop of blood and they are studying, and based on that they are arriving at the conclusion. So, whatever the conclusion they are arriving at by studying one drop of blood, and they are applying it to the entire body, that is to the entire population. But here you are getting a clear dependable results because it is a homogeneous universe or homogeneous population. But all populations are not necessarily homogeneous. If there is a certain amount of heterogeneity, that heterogeneity, as I told you, the rural student,
Yes,
the
sir.
urban student, the male student, the female student, these things also you have to include in your sample,
Yes,
then
sir.
it gives this one. So, that is about law of statistical regularity.
You mentioned another law of inertia of
Law
large
of
numbers.
inertia of
Large
large
numbers.
numbers. That means this is the layman's theory, but actually the fine theory is what we call the central limit theorem. So, according to the central limit theorem, as the size of the sample increases, the resulting sampling distribution tends to be normal. In other words, if small is the size of the sample, the results may be dependable, may not be dependable. If you select the sample, if you increase the size of the sample, say from 10 to 20, 20 to 50, 50 to 100, etc. As the size of the sample increases, you are nearing to the population. For example, if the total population consists of 1000, if you select 10, 990 are not included. If you select 100, only 900 are not included. That means the more the size of the sample, you are approaching or nearing the population. So, large numbers are more stable compared to small numbers.
Kindly
So,
don't mention this to diagnostic centers.
yeah.
The larger the size of the sample, they go on to
Right,
it will be a problem.
So, that is why if it is a heterogeneous universe, I think you have to say take a larger sample. If it is a homogeneous universe, you can take a small sample. So, thank you very much.
I take this
listeners.
opportunity to thank you both for sparing your valuable time.
మా కార్యక్రమాలపై మీ సూచనలు సలహాలు తెలియచేయండి. మీ సూచనలు సలహాలు తెలియచేయవలసిన చిరునామా: డైరెక్టర్, ఆడియో విజువల్ ప్రొడక్షన్ అండ్ రీసెర్చ్ సెంటర్, డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ ఓపెన్ యూనివర్సిటీ, ప్రొఫెసర్ జి రామరెడ్డి మార్గ్, రోడ్ నంబర్ 46, జూబ్లీ హిల్స్, హైదరాబాద్ 500033.